Once upon a time, there lived a little girl called Little Red Riding Hood. She was called so because she always wore a Red Riding Hood that her grandmother had made for her. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to take some food to her grandmother who lived on the other side of the forest. Little Red Riding Hood happily agreed and set off with a basket of goodies for her grandmother. As she was walking through the forest, she met a sly wolf who asked her where she was going. Little Red Riding Hood innocently told him that she was going to her grandmother's house. The wolf, with a cunning plan in mind, suggested that Little Red Riding Hood should pick some flowers for her grandmother from the nearby meadow. While Little Red Riding Hood was busy picking flowers, the wolf hurried to the grandmother's house. He knocked on the door and pretended to be Little Red Riding Hood. The unsuspecting grandmother opened the door, and the wolf, without wasting a moment, gobbled her up. Then, he quickly disguised himself as the grandmother by wearing her nightcap and getting into her bed. When Little Red Riding Hood finally reached her grandmother's house, she was surprised to see the door open. She entered cautiously and noticed that her grandmother looked very strange lying in bed. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have!" she exclaimed. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf in a disguised voice. Little Red Riding Hood then noticed the big eyes of her grandmother and said, "Oh, grandmother, what big eyes you have! All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf, trying hard to disguise his growling voice. Finally, Little Red Riding Hood noticed the big teeth of the wolf and said, "Oh, grandmother, what big teeth you have! All the better to eat you with," shouted the wolf, and with that, he leaped out of the bed and swallowed Little Red Riding Hood in one big gulp. But, just at that moment, a woodsman happened to pass by the house and heard the commotion. He rushed in, saw the wolf, and realized what had happened. With his sharp axe, he quickly cut open the wolf's belly and rescued Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood promised never to talk to strangers in the forest again, and she always remembered her mother's advice to stay on the path and not to dawdle. And as for the wolf, he learned that being sly and cunning doesn't always lead to success, especially when there are brave and kind-hearted people around to help those in need.